month of pluviose from the 21st of January to the 20th of February, 1799. The Union of Ireland considered with regard to the English Constitution. My speech against the tax upon salt. That tax rejected a third time. After a sharp discussion. 1. The powers. In the United States of America, the prevailing opinion was always unfavorable to France. The Congress approved of the military preparations of the President Adams and recommended the continuation of them. The measures of the Directory did not merit so much repulsion. We all thought in the legislative body that the susceptibility and the pride of the United States was excessive. Might we not at this moment address the same complaint to our friends of the New World? But the most essential point was then, as it is now, to avoid the snare which was nearly bringing about the scandal of discord between two great nations that ought to be inseparable. The progress of the conferences of Verstadt were in an inverse sense to the preparatives for the war. Austria, to prolong her stratagem, sent 2 ambassadors to Paris. These new negotiators did not blush to complain of the events at Naples. It was carrying the diplomatic courage very far. Austria forgot that not only the King of Naples had been the aggressor, but that it was an Austrian general who had struck the first blows. At length they ceased to form illusions. The negotiations of peace no longer deceived anybody, but nobody would have dared to suspect the outrage which in a few days struck our negotiators. One of the greatest measures of Pitt occupied England and Ireland. The project of the union of the 2 kingdoms began to be proposed to the parliaments of London and Dublin. This project, rejected at Dublin, raised so serious a discontent against its partisans that their safety was constantly menaced. They feared at one moment a general revolt, and to appease people's minds, they spread the report that the project was adjourned for a year. That report was soon contradicted by the discussions of the British Parliament, where the illustrious Sheridan displayed the highest eloquence. Several times he combated the powerful minister, who replied to his eloquence by a reason of state, calm and profound. "What will become of Ireland?" cried Sheridan. "She will no longer be a country." "Ireland," replied Pitt, "will become the country of England. She will make one common country with us in Scotland. She will partake of all the good that we enjoy." No orator was more beloved among us than Sheridan. The admiration of France was divided between him and Fox. No man was more detested than the son of Chatham, to whom all our evils, whatever they might be, were attributed. The project, therefore, of a union was considered in Paris as a sacrilegious enterprise against which they had not sufficient anathemas. By that egotist sentiment from which no one is exempted, we condemned in our enemy that which we admired in the convention, the reunion of all the provinces under one law. We who had pursued the federalism even to the scaffold, and whose political symbol was the republic, one and indivisible, we would no longer see patriotism among our neighbors, but in their divisions, nor good sense, but in federalism. All our sympathies were for the adversaries of the Union. Without doubt, we should not be sincere if we did not appreciate in a different manner at this moment our opinions of that epoch, without doubt, in shaking off the prejudices and hatreds of that period. It must be owned that all the objections which they heaped together against the great measure signified very little. But it is there not another manner of considering the question? If the union offered with regard to the present only an aspect of concord and strength, did it leave no inquietude for the future? And the great statesman who did not foresee that future, is he without blame? It is under that point of view that the union of England with Ireland has not been sufficiently considered, and I beg my readers to permit me to pause for a moment. A conquered province is governed by the conquering power according to particular laws, or else she is united to that power of which she becomes a part. As long as she is treated as a conquered country, it is quite natural that her provincial interests should be sacrificed to the interests of the conquerors. A good politic is unsatisfied if they do not abuse their victory sufficiently to rekindle the war. If they know how to employ a mixture of force and moderation in the legislative measures, with which the vanquished have nothing to do but to obey. The conquerors are magnanimous if they leave to the conquered country some of its vague national forms to which the vanity of the feeble is too happy to cling elusively. Such was the state of Ireland before the Union. An active inspection, a salutary mistrust were the inevitable consequences of that state of affairs. The oppression of 6 million of Irish Catholics forced to pay the tithes of a Protestant worship was not devoid of a certain relative justice. It was a tribute to the religion of the conquerors. That religious subjection of the greatest number towards the church of the dominant minority was the consequence of a political subjection. One of those forces supported the other. One was perhaps necessary to the other, and if it was necessary, the political necessity absolved it. The Irish had not only been conquered, but despoiled. Their lands had been distributed to the Protestants. The priests had been deprived of the tithes, as the proprietors had been of their lands. A conquest driven to such terrible extremities could not fail to leave the most bitter remembrances behind it. That terrible abuse of a victory could not quickly be forgotten. The oppressor, not having the right, must naturally have no other support left but the sword, in maintaining beneath his yoke those whom he had stripped, in transmitting to the ministers of that victorious church the tithes of the conquered church. The law was not inconsistent. It was the logic of the strongest.